everyone, welcome back. We all want to get to the heart of things quickly, right? And honestly, who doesn't want to communicate more effectively? So today we're doing a deep dive into something that really underpins all of that. Language. The words we choose. Our mission today is to help you sharpen your spoken and written English.
Yes.
To help you sound more confident, more professional. And to do that, we're going to clear out the clutter. The weak words, the lazy words, the overused words.
I like that. A spring cleaning for your vocabulary.
Exactly right.
I think we all have those go-to words, those habits. We use them without even thinking about how effective they actually are. And sometimes, not doing us any favors. So this deep dive is all about figuring out which words are holding us back. Identifying those, what did you call them?
Verbal barnacles.
Verbal barnacles, yeah, those. And then we'll give you some much better alternatives to use instead.
Okay, so why is all this linguistic tidying up so important? Well, think about it this way. If you use vague language, people are left wondering what you really mean. If you use the same words over and over again, you're going to lose your audience.
Yeah, they tune out.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, the words we use really do shape how other people perceive us.
They do. It's about how confident you sound, how competent you seem. And it's amazing how just a small tweak in your vocabulary can make such a big difference. When you choose to use really specific and impactful words, your message is just so much clearer. It's more direct. And people really take notice. It's almost like you're switching from a blurry picture to high definition.
Nice. I like that.
High-def communication.
Yeah.
All right. So let's start this upgrade process.
Okay.
We're going to look at several categories of words that might be dimming your shine a little bit.
Right.
And we'll give you, of course, much brighter replacements. So to kick things off, let's start with the words that just sort of...
Don't quite hit the mark.
Yeah, they kind of fall flat.
Right. These are the vague and weak words, the ones that lack punch. They don't paint a very clear picture. Okay, so first up on the list, very. It's everywhere, isn't it? Very good, very interesting, very big. It's almost like a missed opportunity for more interesting language.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting to think about all the other ways you could say those things. Instead of very good, you could say excellent, superb, outstanding. Each of those has like a slightly different shade of meaning.
Right.
And instead of very big, you could use huge, enormous, or massive. Even massive, that has like a very different feel to it than just very big.
Yes, you're painting a much more vivid picture in the listener's mind.
Right.
Okay, next on our list is really. Similar to very, it's trying to add emphasis, but it doesn't really do much of the work.
Exactly. Really is kind of a shrug. You know, it's like you're trying to make something sound stronger, but it doesn't really intensify it much at all. Think about it. She's really nice.
Okay.
Now, how about she's genuinely kind, or she's exceptionally pleasant, or even she's absolutely delightful.
Oh, I like that.
Those give you a much stronger, more specific sense of just how nice she is. Yeah, they do.
All right, next up is stuff.
Ooh, stuff.
The ultimate vague word. It could be anything.
The problem with stuff and words like it is that they don't really tell you anything. When you say, I have a lot of stuff to do, your listener has to guess what you're talking about.
Okay.
Are you talking about work, errands, chores? If you said something like, I have several important projects to finalize, or I have errands to run this afternoon, then they actually know what you mean.
It takes away the ambiguity.
Right.
Okay, similar to stuff, we also have things, another word that's used for, well, everything.
Yeah. It's another word that lacks detail. Instead of saying, I learned a lot of things today, tell people what you learned. Did you learn new methodologies? Did you learn core principles? Practical skills. The more specific you are, the more intelligent and articulate you're going to sound.
Okay, last one in our vague and weak category. Got.
Okay.
Got is so informal and it pops up everywhere, but often it's not very precise.
What I think is so interesting about got is that there's so many other verbs that you could use instead. Verbs that are much more specific, like, did you receive a message? Did you acquire a skill? Did you secure a deal? For example, instead of I got a promotion, you could say, I was promoted to senior analyst.
Oh.
Or instead of I got the permits, you could say, I obtained the necessary permits. It just sounds so much more professional and confident when you use those more specific verbs.
Much better. Okay, so we've tackled the vague and weak words. Now let's move on to what we're calling the lazy fillers. These are the words that just kind of
Sneak into our sentences.
Yeah, they sneak in there without really contributing anything.
So those little verbal pauses, those crutches that we use,
Yeah.
without even realizing it. And honestly, they can make you sound less polished.
Okay, first up, like, used as a filler. This is a big one, I think, for a lot of people.
It is.
It's that, like, that you just kind of throw into a sentence. It was like a really interesting presentation.
Yeah. The most important things to understand about like as a filler is that it almost never adds any meaning to what you're saying. The best thing to do is just get rid of it.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting presentation, so much stronger, much more direct. Pay attention to how often you use like as a filler. You might be surprised.
Yeah, you might be surprised. It's definitely a habit worth breaking. All right, next we have just. Seems harmless, but it can really water down what you're trying to say.
It really can. Just is a subtle underminer. You say, I just wanted to ask a quick question. That just makes you sound less important. It makes your question seem less important. If you say, I have a quick question, it sounds much more confident.
Yeah.
And it also shows that you respect other people's time.
Right, you're owning your request.
Yeah.
All right, another filler culprit, literally. This one's interesting because it does have a meaning, but it's often used incorrectly. People use it to emphasize something when they don't actually mean it, literally.
Yes, exactly. Literally should only be used for things that actually happened. If you say, I literally died laughing, but you're still here.
Yeah.
You didn't actually die. It was funny. In that case, you could just say, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
That's more accurate. And it's not a cliche.
Okay, how about basically? It shows up at the beginning of a lot of sentences, but most of the time, it doesn't add any important information.
The interesting thing about basically is that you can usually just take it out and the sentence is still fine. In fact, it's usually better. So instead of basically the project is on schedule, you can just say the project is on schedule.
Yeah.
Try leaving it out a few times and see what happens. Your message is still clear. Plus, it's more concise, more direct. I like it. Okay, last one in our lazy filler category. Honestly, you'd think this one would be good, right?
Right.
We want to be honest. But the funny thing is, if you're already being truthful, if that's how you communicate all the time, then adding honestly can sound weird.
It's like you're implying that you're not always honest. So most of the time, you're better off just leaving it out. I believe it's a good approach.
Yeah.
Simple, direct, and no need to add honestly.
All right, so we've tackled the vague and weak words. We've covered the lazy fillers. Now let's switch gears a bit and focus on words that clutter up our writing. These words aren't necessarily wrong, but they just kind of weigh things down.
Exactly. When you're writing, you have a little more time to think about your word choices.
Right.
And there are certain words that just show up all the time unnecessarily, They add to the word count, but they don't make your writing any clearer.
Okay, first up in the writing category is that. And specifically, we're talking about when that isn't really needed for the sentence to make sense. Yeah, it's fascinating how often that is just there to connect two parts of a sentence.
Yeah.
But you can often take it out and the sentence is still perfectly clear. So for example, you could say, I think the deadline is next week. You don't need to say, I think that the deadline is next week.
Yeah.
It just makes your writing more streamlined, more direct.
It's easier to read that way. Okay, next up. The intensifiers, totally and completely. You might think they add emphasis, but a lot of times the adjective is strong enough on its own.
Right. Think about it. Words like certain, drained, mistaken, those words already mean completely. So you don't need to add totally or completely in front of them. I'm exhausted is just as strong, if not stronger, than I'm completely exhausted. And sometimes using those intensifiers can even sound a little over the top.
Yeah, they can. Okay, and this kind of goes hand in hand with our next point. Really good and really bad. Just like very, really is just kind of sitting there. There's a chance to use more descriptive language.
Exactly. Instead of always saying really good or really bad, think about more specific words you could use.
Yeah.
Was the presentation compelling? Was it insightful? Was it well-researched? Or if it was bad, was it unconvincing? Was it flawed? Was it even misleading? You can paint a much clearer picture for the reader when you use those more descriptive adjectives.
And speaking of positive adjectives, how about amazing? It's not a bad word, but people use it so much that it's kind of lost its power.
The thing about amazing is it really depends on what you're talking about. If you're describing a meal, was it delicious? Was it flavorful? Was it exquisite? Was it perfectly prepared? Being more specific just makes your writing so much more interesting.
Absolutely. It really does depend on the context. All right, last one in the writing category.
Oh,
Nice.
nice.
It's a pleasant word, but it doesn't really tell you anything specific.
Nice is a
Yeah.
classic example of a word that's just too general.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, she sent a nice email, what do you mean? Was it thoughtful? Was it informative? Was it well-written? Prompt? Personalized? When you choose a more specific word, you really help your reader understand what you liked about the email.
Okay, so we've decluttered the vague words, the lazy fillers, and some unnecessary words in writing. Now let's talk about a category of words that can actually make you sound less confident.
This is a really important category, especially in professional settings. Some words can make you sound unsure of yourself, even if that's not how you feel.
Okay, let's start with maybe.
Maybe.
Especially when you're giving an opinion or a suggestion, it can sound a bit wishy-washy.
Yeah, it can. Like if you say, maybe we should consider a different approach, it doesn't sound as strong as let's consider a different approach.
Right.
When you're making decisions, it's important to express your ideas confidently.
Yes, it is. And then there are those little phrases, sort of and kind of. They soften what you're saying. And sometimes that's fine, but other times it can actually weaken your message.
The thing about sort of and kind of is they make you sound hesitant, like you're not sure. If you're tired, just say I'm tired. Don't say I'm kind of tired.
Yeah.
Taking out those little qualifiers usually makes your message stronger.
Makes sense. What about I think? We say it all the time, but is it always the best choice?
It's a good question. Sometimes I think is fine. Like if you're sharing a belief or a hypothesis, then it's perfectly appropriate. But often it's just unnecessary. You know, if you're stating your opinion, you can just say, this could be an effective strategy. You don't need to say, I think this could be an effective strategy. Your opinion is clear without it.
Good point. Next up, I feel like.
Okay.
And here we're talking about when it's not actually about a feeling.
Right. This is a really common one.
It is.
Okay.
I feel like this is the wrong direction. But you're not actually talking about a feeling, you're stating an opinion.
Yes. I feel like should only be used for actual feelings. When you use it to express an opinion, it just doesn't sound as strong or as authoritative.
Yeah.
Like in that example, you could just say, this is the wrong direction. Choose the words that express exactly what you mean.
Right. In this case, clarity trumps feelings. Okay, last one in our doubt and weakness category. That little tag on, you know. We all do it. It's a really common habit in conversation.
It is. The thing about you know is it's often this unconscious way of trying to get the other person to agree with you or to keep the conversation going. But it doesn't add any meaning to what you're saying. And sometimes it can even make you sound, I don't know, less polished. So try to be clear and direct and say what you mean without relying on, to get your point across.
Okay, we're in the home stretch now. We've got one more category to cover, what we're calling business and email killers. These are words that can really hurt you in a professional setting.
Yes. Really important category. In the workplace, your word choices can have a big impact on how people see you. Your colleagues, your clients, your boss, they all notice the words you use. It affects how competent they think you are, how confident they think you are.
Right. So first up, sorry. And specifically, we're talking about when you're not actually apologizing.
Right. When you use sorry, just to soften something you're saying,
Yeah.
it's important to apologize when you make a mistake, absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you're always saying sorry for things that aren't your fault,
Yeah.
it can make you seem less confident.
Right.
Like, instead of saying, sorry to bother you, but do you have a minute? You could just say, do you have a minute?
Right.
You're still being polite, you're being respectful, but you're not putting yourself down.
Yeah.
And another thing, when you use sorry all the time, it loses its meaning. So when you do need to apologize for something, it's not as impactful.
Good point. All right, last one. This is a classic. I'm no expert, but people often say this because they want to sound humble, but it can actually have the opposite effect.
Right. When you start a sentence with, I'm no expert, but, you're basically telling people not to listen to you. You're undermining your own credibility before you even say what you want to say. So even if you don't think you're the most knowledgeable person in the room, your opinion is still valuable. Instead of putting yourself down, try saying something like, here's a suggestion based on my understanding, or my initial thought is.
Those are great. Okay, wow, we've covered a lot today.
We have.
Just to quickly recap, we talked about vague and weak words. We tackled those lazy fillers. We looked at unnecessary words that clutter up our writing. And we covered words that can make you sound less confident and those business and email killers.
That's quite a list. But I think the most important thing to remember is that the words you choose really matter. They have a big impact on how people understand you and how they see you. And if you start paying attention to these common language traps, if you start choosing stronger, more specific words, your communication is going to become so much clearer, you'll sound more confident, and you'll make a much bigger impact.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener? Well, if you start to consciously remove these weak or vague words and you replace them with more precise and powerful alternatives, your English is going to improve.
Absolutely.
Both your spoken English and your written English will sound more professional, more polished, and ultimately more impressive.
And remember, this isn't about becoming perfect overnight. Just pick 3 or 4 of the words or phrases that we talked about today and try to use them differently this week. See what happens. You might be surprised at how much of a difference it makes.
It's a great first step. So this week, pay attention to the words you're using.
Yes.
In your conversations, in your emails, and always remember, clarity is power. When you choose your words carefully, you can communicate more effectively and make a bigger impact.
This makes me think, what are some of those words or phrases that you've noticed, maybe you use them, maybe other people do, that kind of fall into these categories?
Taking a moment to think about that will really help you remember these concepts. And it'll help you figure out how you can apply them to your own communication style.
That is some excellent food for thought. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Until next time, keep your language sharp.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome in. We're jumping right into it today.
Absolutely. Let's get straight to it.
For those of you who are here, I think you guys get it. You want to understand what truly matters.
That's right. Cutting through all the noise.
Without, spending all day trying to figure it out. And so today we are taking a deep dive into something that I think will be so helpful for you. We're talking about taking your English vocabulary and making it, just sharper, smarter, more nasty.
More sophisticated, just more fluent.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And we have this fantastic resource we're diving into. It focuses on 22 really common English words. And, there's nothing wrong with these words, but by swapping them out, you can really transform how you sound, how you express yourself.
I love that.
Yeah.
So our mission in this deep dive, and I think this will be really, really practical and useful for you guys listening, is we're going to go through all 22 of these words, and we're going to give you guys some really practical alternatives.
Yes.
That you can use so you can sound more confident, you can sound more fluent, you can sound more natural.
And we're not even talking about using like super complex vocabulary or anything like that. It's just about recognizing that sometimes those really simple words, the ones we use all the time, actually aren't as effective as some other choices that are out there.
And, I think that's one of the things that I'm always trying to do in my own life is just to be aware of the words that I'm using and make sure that they're really conveying what I want them to convey.
Right, because if they're not, then you're not communicating effectively.
Exactly. So let's get into it. The resource that we are looking at today, it very helpfully organizes these 22 words into 4 groups. And so we're just going to go group by group, and I think this will make it really nice and easy for you guys to follow along. So the first group is words that are too basic. And, like I said, there's nothing inherently wrong with these words, but maybe they're not doing the heavy lifting that they could be doing.
Right. Like we learned them early on, and then they become such a habit,
Yeah.
We don't always stop and consider if there's a better choice, a more accurate choice.
I think that's so true.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think, eye-opening to look at some of these alternatives and be like, oh, wow, that's a much better way of saying what I was trying to say.
Absolutely. And it can really change how people perceive you in your message, too.
Right. So the first word in our 2 basic group is the word very. Now, we all use very. It's a fine word. But there are so many other richer, more descriptive words that we could be using instead.
Oh, for sure.
And so, for example, the resource gives the example of, instead of saying, I'm very tired, which, we've all said that a million times.
Right.
Why not say, I'm exhausted, right? Like, I'm exhausted after work.
Yeah.
That just conveys a much deeper level of fatigue than just saying, I'm very tired.
It does. It really, very tired is kind of a general statement, but exhausted really brings to mind this complete depletion of energy. You can almost feel the difference.
No.
Like, why just state a fact when you can actually evoke a feeling?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally. And that's really what we're going for here, is to use words that are really gonna, like, paint a picture in the listener's mind and make them really feel what we're trying to say.
Right.
And so another example of a word that's a little too basic is the word really. Again, we all use this word, it's fine. But instead of saying, I was really happy, right? Which again is fine. Why not say, I was thrilled or I was excited, right? I was thrilled to see you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, doesn't that just sound so much more like genuinely enthusiastic than I was really happy?
It does. Really is another one of those words that just kind of like intensifies things in a general way.
Mm-hmm.
But thrilled, excited, those actually pinpoint a very specific type of happiness.
Uh-huh.
And that makes your communication so much more vibrant, so much more engaging.
Right. And so then we have two words that are, I think, like the ultimate in too basic, which are stuff and things, right? We all use these words. But think about how much clearer your communication could be if instead of saying, I have a lot of stuff to do, you said, I have a lot of work to do today, right? Or I have a lot of tasks to finish. And instead of saying, I learned some new things, you said, I learned some new skills at school, or I learned some fascinating facts.
Yeah, I think what's really key here is the clarity, right? When you swap out stuff and things for these more precise nouns, you remove the guesswork for the listener,
Yeah.
Your message becomes immediately clearer and easier to grasp.
Totally. And it shows that you've put more thought into what you're trying to communicate, right? It's not just like, oh, I have a bunch of things to do. It's like, no, I have these specific things to do.
Exactly.
And, and then another two basic pair are good and bad, right?
Exactly.
And again, these are fine words. They have their place. But why not use more descriptive words, instead of saying the food was good, which, again, fine, but like, not very exciting. Say, the food was delicious, right? Or the food was tasty.
Yeah, it makes me hungry just hearing you say that.
Right. Doesn't that make you like want to eat that food more than if I just said the food was good?
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly it, right? Good is so general, it could mean anything. Delicious, that appeals to the senses, it makes it so much more vivid.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, instead of saying the movie was bad, which again, like we all know what you mean, but why not say the movie was boring or the movie was disappointing or the movie was awful?
Yeah.
Right? You get a much better sense of why you didn't enjoy the movie.
Yeah, you're actually giving more meaningful information, even though it seems like a small change.
Exactly. Okay, so that was our two basic group. Now we're moving on to our second group of words, which are filler words. And these are words that often sneak into our sentences without really adding any substance. And sometimes they can even make us sound a little less confident.
That's right. And, being aware of these is huge because once you start cutting them out, you realize how much clearer and stronger your spoken English can be.
It's true. And, and it's not about being perfect. It's just about being aware of these words and trying to use them a little bit less.
Exactly.
So the first filler word that we're going to talk about is like. Now, like can be used in a lot of different ways, but the resource that we're looking at is specifically talking about when we use like when it's not really necessary. So, for example, instead of saying it was like hard, just say it was hard.
Yeah.
Like you don't really need the like there.
Exactly. That overuse of like can be really distracting and it doesn't add any real meaning
Right.
to your sentence. So by getting rid of it, you're being more concise.
Yeah.
And you're projecting this greater sense of assurance.
And clarity.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, we all know what you mean when you say it was hard. You don't need to say it was like hard.
Exactly.
So similar to like, we have the word just. Now, sometimes just has a purpose, but a lot of times it can be taken out and it'll make your sentences sound more direct and it can make you sound more assertive and more sure of yourself.
Right.
So instead of saying, I just want to ask, you could say, I want to ask. Instead of saying, I just need to go to the store, you could say, I need to go to the store.
And, just often have this way of softening what you're saying when actually a more direct approach might be much more effective.
Absolutely.
Removing it shows that you're confident in what you're requesting or what you're stating or whatever it may be.
Right. And then another common pairing that we hear a lot are the phrases really good and really bad, which we already talked about swapping out really. But the resource that we're looking at goes one step further and says, instead of saying really good or really bad, why not just use one really strong word? So instead of saying really good, say fantastic, or the show was fantastic.
Oh, that.
Instead of saying really bad, say terrible. The food was terrible.
Right.
Think about how much stronger that sounds than saying the food was really bad.
It does. By taking out really and replacing it with that more descriptive adjective, you're just creating a much stronger, a much more memorable impression.
Absolutely. And then 2 more filler words that sneak into our sentences all the time are totally and completely.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of times these words don't really add any meaning. They're just kind of there. And so the resource suggests that we just take them out altogether.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, I'm completely ready, just say, I'm ready, I'm ready to go. Instead of saying, I'm totally exhausted, just say, I'm exhausted.
It's more efficient.
Yeah.
It's less cluttered.
Right. It just sounds cleaner. It sounds more natural.
Yeah.
And then the final filler word that we're going to talk about is amazing. Now, amazing is a great word. It's a positive word. It's fine. But why not use a word that's a little more specific and that really paints a picture in the listener's mind?
Right.
So instead of saying the view is amazing, say the view is stunning or the view is breathtaking, right? Think about how much more of an impact that has on the listener.
It really does.
Yeah.
Amazing, it's a great positive adjective, but stunning, breathtaking, those really convey a sense of awe, like a visual splendor that amazing doesn't quite capture.
Totally. Okay, so that was our filler words group. Now we're moving on to our third group of words, which are words that make you sound unsure. And I love this group of words because I think it's so important to sound confident when you're speaking English, and these words can really undermine your confidence.
That's right. And it all comes down to the subtle messages that we're sending without even realizing it.
Exactly.
It's not just about the words themselves. It's about how those words make other people perceive us.
Right. So the first word in this group is maybe. Now, maybe is a fine word to use if you're genuinely unsure about something. But a lot of times we use maybe as a way to soften a suggestion or to make ourselves sound less assertive.
Right.
And so the resource that we're looking at suggests that we just be more direct. So instead of saying, maybe we can go to the park, just say, let's go to the park. If you want to go to the park, just say it.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure if you want to go to the park, then by all means use maybe. But a lot of times we use maybe when we actually have a pretty strong preference.
And that hesitancy, it can come across as a lack of confidence, and that can undermine your message, even if what you're saying is a good idea.
Exactly. So another phrase that we often use that can make us sound unsure is, I think. Now, it's fine to share your thoughts, but sometimes removing I think can make your statements sound more confident and assertive.
Right.
So instead of saying, I think it's a good idea, just say, it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a very subtle change.
Yes.
But it just makes you sound so much more sure of yourself.
Right. And then 2 other phrases that can make us sound unsure are kind of and sort of. Now, these words often just weaken what we're trying to say, and they make us sound less confident in our own opinions. So instead of saying, I'm kind of tired, just say, I'm tired. Instead of saying, I sort of agree, just say, I agree.
Yeah. Kind of and sort of, they introduce this element of vagueness, uncertainty, and when you remove them, you're just being so much more direct and your message becomes that much clearer.
Right. And then another word that we often use that doesn't really add anything to our sentences is, Now, sometimes, can be useful, like if you're trying to check in with a listener and make sure they're following you. But a lot of times we just use it out of habit. And so the resource suggests that we just try to be more clear in our communication and just remove, whenever possible.
Exactly. Because a lot of the time, is just this verbal crutch that we use.
Right.
And we don't really need it.
Right. So instead of saying, it's hard, just say, it's hard. Like the listener probably knows what you mean.
Yeah, they can probably figure it out.
Yeah.
Without you having to use that filler phrase.
Exactly. And then the final word in our words that make you sound unsure group is honestly. And I love this one because I think it's so true. Like if you're an honest person, you don't need to keep telling people that you're honest.
Right. It should go without saying. Right.
Right. So instead of saying, honestly, I like it, just say, I like it. Let your words speak for themselves.
Exactly. When you use honestly all the time, it almost makes it sound like you're not always being honest. So by cutting it out, you're just allowing your words to stand on their own merit.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So that was words that make you sound unsure. Now we're moving on to our final group, which is formal or email talk. And these are words that are perfectly fine to use in writing, but they often sound a little too stiff and formal when we use them in spoken English.
Right. Like you don't want to sound like you're reading from a textbook.
Exactly. So the first word in this group is got. Now, got is a very common word, but it can sound a little bit informal, especially in certain contexts. So the resource suggests that instead of using got, we use more specific and natural sounding alternatives like I bought or I received.
Yeah.
So for example, instead of saying I got a new phone, you could say I bought a new phone yesterday or I received a new phone for my birthday.
It just sounds a little more polished, a little more considered.
Right. And then another word that we often use in writing that doesn't always sound so great in spoken English is that. And a lot of times that is just not necessary. So the resource suggests that we just remove it whenever we can. So instead of saying, I know that she's right, just say, I know she's right. Instead of saying, I think that it's a good idea, just say, I think it's a good idea.
And again, it's about making those sentences flow more naturally, getting rid of that kind of punky written style.
Exactly. And then another word that can sound a little too formal in spoken English is nice. Now, nice is a fine word, but it's pretty general. So instead of using nice, why not use a more descriptive word like friendly, kind, or polite? So instead of saying he's a nice guy, you could say he's a very friendly guy, or he's a really kind person.
Yeah. Just like we were saying earlier about good, nice is this very broad adjective. It doesn't give you much information. So by swapping it out for something more specific, you're actually telling the listener more about the person you're describing.
Absolutely. And then another phrase that we often use that can sound a little too formal is sorry. Now, it's important to apologize when you've done something wrong, but a lot of times we use sorry when we don't really need to. Like if we're about to ask a question or if we're about to make a request.
Right.
So instead of saying sorry to ask, but can I borrow your pen? Just say, can I borrow your pen?
Right. Be direct.
Yes.
And it's not about being rude. It's just about being clear, being concise.
Right. And then another phrase that can sound a little too formal in spoken English is I feel like. Now, I feel is a perfectly fine phrase to use when you're talking about your emotions, but a lot of times we use I feel like when we're actually expressing an opinion.
Right.
And so the resource suggests that instead of saying I feel like it's wrong, we just say it's wrong. Or instead of saying I feel like that's a bad idea, we just say that's a bad idea.
Yeah, you're stating it as a fact rather than as just kind of like a personal feeling.
Right, exactly. And then the final phrase in our formal or email talk group is I'm no expert, but. And I love this one because I think we've all said this before, but it's so self-defeating, like why would you start a sentence by telling people that you don't know what you're talking about?
Yeah, you're immediately undermining your own credibility.
Exactly. So instead of saying, I'm no expert, but I think this is a good idea, just say, I think this is a good idea.
Yeah.
Or, here's my opinion, or here's what I think.
Exactly. Just own it,
Right.
Don't apologize for having a thought.
Exactly. Okay, so we have gone through all 22 words and their more effective alternatives, that's a lot. So now the resource that we're looking at includes a little practice section. And I think this is a really great way to really solidify these words in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's one thing to hear us talk about them, but it's another thing to actually try them out for yourself, right? To get them into your own vocabulary.
Exactly. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say a sentence using one of the less effective words or phrases, and then I'm going to pause for a second, and I want you guys listening to say the more effective version out loud.
Yeah, get your vocal cords warmed up.
Right. So are you guys ready?
We're ready when you are.
Okay, so the first sentence is, I'm very tired today. Okay, so the better way to say that would be, I'm exhausted today. All right, next sentence. The pizza was really good. So instead of saying that, you could say, the pizza was delicious. Okay, next sentence. I kind of agree. And a more confident way to say that would be, I agree. All right, next sentence, maybe we can try that. So instead of saying that, you could say, let's try that. And last sentence, I got a new job. Okay, so the more formal, specific way to say that would be, I started a new job.
Great job, everyone. And even just saying those out loud a few times, you can already start to feel how much more natural those stronger words sound.
Totally. So I think we've really taken a deep dive here. We've gone through a lot of material.
We have.
And the main takeaway for you guys listening, I think, should be that Using stronger, more specific, more descriptive language can really make a big difference in your fluency and your confidence when you're speaking English.
Right. And it's not about, being perfect all the time. It's just about just being mindful of your choices and making those small changes,
Well, and I love what you said about it not being about being perfect.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we get so caught up in trying to be perfect that we actually end up not speaking at all.
Right. And that defeats the purpose.
Right.
We want you to communicate. We want you to express yourself.
Exactly.
And these changes are just about helping you do that more effectively.
Absolutely. So here's a challenge for you guys listening this week. Pick 5 words from the list that we talked about today and really make a conscious effort to notice when you use them. And then challenge yourself to replace those words with one of the more effective alternatives that we talked about.
Yeah, just 5, to start. And you can even write them down, put them on a sticky note, whatever works for you.
Totally, totally. And then once you get comfortable with those 5 words, then you can add 5 more and then 5 more.
Exactly. It's a process.
Yeah.
It's not an overnight thing.
Right. And if you guys found this deep dive helpful, and I hope you did, please share it with anyone else who you think might benefit from it. I think clearer communication is something that we all can strive for.
Yeah, absolutely. And, sharing what you've learned is actually a great way to reinforce it for yourself, too. When you explain something to someone else, you're actually processing it more deeply yourself.
Totally, totally. And so as a final thought for you guys to kind of chew on, think about how by reducing the number of weak words that you use, you're not only making your English sound better to other people, but you're actually sharpening your own thinking. Because when you're forced to come up with a more precise word, you often end up having to think more deeply about what you're actually trying to say.
That's a really good point. It's like this feedback loop. Better language leads to clearer thought and vice versa.
Totally, totally. All right, so we've covered a lot today, but maybe in a future deep dive, we could even look at some more beginner-level vocabulary improvements. But for now, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye. Okay, so have you ever felt like, your English is okay? Like, you can get by and people understand you, but it just doesn't sound quite as natural or as interesting as you'd like.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people hit that point.
Yeah.
Where they've got like the basics down.
Right.
They can communicate.
Yeah.
But they want to kind of like level up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's exactly what we're diving into today, because we have this really cool compilation of 22 words that English learners often really kind of depend on a lot when they're starting out. And we're gonna go through these and give you some ways to say the same things, just maybe with a little more nuance, a little more style.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say this is not about becoming super advanced. It's about just making these small tweaks to your everyday language.
Absolutely.
Would sound more natural and confident.
And why is this important? Well, because I think sometimes we get so focused on just getting the message across that we forget that the way we say things can actually really impact how people perceive us and how confident we feel.
Absolutely. I think using more precise language can really help you to avoid misunderstandings.
Yeah.
And it can also make you sound, smarter and more fluent, even if you're not using, super complicated vocabulary.
Totally.
It's more about choosing the right words.
Right. So let's jump right into this list of 22 words.
Okay.
The first category in this source material is too simple.
Okay.
And these are words that, we all use them, we all need them,
Yeah.
they're fine, but maybe there are just some other ways to say the same thing and be a little more
Expressive.
expressive. There you go.
Yeah.
So the first word is very.
Oh, very. Yes.
And I think all of us, are guilty of overusing this one. I'm very happy. It's very important.
Right. The weather's very nice.
The movie was very long.
Yeah.
And, it gets the job done. It adds emphasis.
It does, but it can be a bit generic.
Yeah.
Doesn't really tell us much.
Right.
So for example, instead of saying, I'm very tired.
Which we've all said a million times.
Exactly. The source suggests using, I'm exhausted.
Exhausted.
Right. And think about how much stronger that is.
It is much stronger. Like if you say, I'm exhausted, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
something's really wrong.
You've had enough.
I need a nap.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, good one. So very is out, and we're going to use some better words.
More descriptive words, yeah.
Okay, perfect. What's next?
So the next word on the list is really, and it's kind of similar to very.
Oh, yeah, in that it's just kind of a bland intensifier.
Yeah, it's like a default setting.
Yeah.
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 But we can do better.
Okay, give me an example.
So instead of saying it's really hot,
Okay.
The source suggests saying it's boiling.
Oh, it's boiling. I like that.
Yeah, it's much more vivid, right?
It is. You can like feel the heat.
You can picture it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sold.
Very good.
Really is out boiling. Isn't what else we got?
Okay, so the next two are interesting stuff and things.
Okay, stuff and things. I mean, those are just like the ultimate vague words, right?
Okay, they're like placeholders.
Yeah.
You're not really giving any specific information.
Right. So like if I say, I have a lot of stuff to do, well, what stuff?
Exactly. And that's where being more specific can really make a difference.
Okay, so what does the source recommend?
So for stuff, they suggest saying work or many things to do.
Okay, so instead of I have a lot of stuff to do,
You could say I have a lot of work to do.
right, or I have many things to do.
Right. And it immediately gives the listener a better understanding
It does, yeah.
of what you're talking about.
That's so interesting. Okay, and what about things?
So for things, they give the example of I learned many things.
Okay. Which again, it's not wrong. It's just not very
Informative.
right.
So instead they suggest saying I learned many new words.
Okay, so again, just being specific.
Yeah, exactly. And it also shows that you have a wider vocabulary.
It does. Okay, stuff things out, more specific words. And okay, what else is too simple?
All right, so the last two in this category are good and bad.
Okay, good and bad. These are like the most basic adjectives, right?
Yeah, they're like the foundation of our descriptive language.
But the problem
They're
is,
so general, you know?
right,
They don't really tell us much.
right. If you say the movie was good,
Yeah, what does that even mean?
right? Like, was it funny? Was it scary? Was it interesting?
Exactly. So the source suggests using more specific adjectives like great fun or exciting for good.
Okay, I like it. So the movie was great if you just like really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
The movie was fun if it was like, lighthearted and entertaining.
Right.
Or the movie was exciting if it was like action-packed.
Exactly. And you can see how each adjective paints a different picture.
It tells you more about the movie than just good.
Right. And the same goes for bad.
Okay.
Instead of just saying the food was bad, you can say the food was terrible.
Right.
Or the food was cold.
Yeah.
Or even the food was disgusting.
Okay. Yeah. That's much more descriptive.
It gives you a better sense of what went wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So that's the end of Too Simple. And I really like how even just those few swaps,
Yeah.
like you can already see how that can make your English sound so much more.
Interesting and colorful.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to the next category.
All right. So the next category is repeated too much.
Okay. Repeated too much.
Yeah.
So these are words that are not necessarily bad in themselves,
Right.
but we just tend to,
Overuse them.
yeah.
And it becomes a bit distracting.
And it becomes a habit, and you don't even realize you're doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. So the first word in this category is like.
Okay, like the filler word.
Yes. The infamous like.
I think everyone does this.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure I've said it like a million times in this episode already.
I know, me too. It's just like so natural to just like throw it in there.
Yeah. It's a way of like, giving yourself time to think.
Right.
Or like, connecting with the listener.
Right.
But too much of it can be really distracting.
It can, and it can also make you sound less confident.
Yes, absolutely.
So the source just says like, get rid of it.
Yeah. In most cases, you can just delete it.
Like it's not necessary.
Exactly. So instead of saying it was like amazing.
You just say, it was amazing.
Right. Much cleaner.
Okay.
Much more impactful.
I like it.
Okay, good.
All right. What's the next repeat offender?
So the next one is just.
Oh yeah, like, I just wanted to ask her. I just need a minute.
Yeah. And it can sound polite, you know?
Right.
But sometimes it can weaken your message.
Right. It can make you sound a little bit hesitant.
Yeah, exactly.
So should we just get rid of just entirely?
Well, not necessarily. The source suggests using it only when it's essential.
Okay.
So if it's not adding anything to the meaning,
Just get rid of it.
exactly, just cut it out.
Perfect. I can do that.
Okay, good.
All right. What's next?
So the next one is amazing.
Okay. Amazing. I mean, it's a great word. It's positive.
Yeah, it's enthusiastic.
But I guess if you use it for everything.
It loses its power.
Right. It's like the boy who cried wolf.
Exactly. So the source recommends having some other adjectives in your back pocket,
Okay. Like what?
like beautiful, fun, or wonderful.
Okay. So instead of it was amazing.
You could say it was beautiful if you're talking about scenery,
Right.
or it was fun if you're talking about an experience,
Right.
or it was wonderful if you're just expressing general delight.
Okay. So again, just like having more variety.
Exactly. Using a richer vocabulary.
Perfect.
Okay.
What else do we overuse?
Okay. So the next one is nice.
Nice. Oh man, this one is so common.
It's like the default compliment
Right, and it's not bad to be nice.
Of course not.
Yeah.
It's a bit bland,
Yeah.
So the source suggests using more specific adjectives when you're describing people.
Okay, so instead of he's nice.
You could say he's friendly.
Right.
Or he's kind.
Okay. Yeah, that tells me more about their personality.
Exactly. And it makes your compliment more meaningful.
Yeah. Okay. Good one. And what's the last one in this repeat offender category?
Okay, so the last one is really good.
Really good.
Yeah, and this one kind of combines the problems of really and good.
It does, yeah.
So it's like a double whammy of blandness.
Okay. So how do we fix it?
Well, the source suggests using a single stronger adjective.
Okay. Like what?
Like delicious if you're talking about food.
Right.
Fantastic if you're talking about an experience.
Okay.
Or excellent if you're talking about quality.
Okay. So it's just about like upping the intensity.
Exactly. Finding that one perfect word.
I love it. Okay. So that was repeated too much.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good reminder that sometimes it's not about learning new words.
Right.
It's about using the words we already know.
More effective.
Yeah, more effectively.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, let's move on to the next category.
Okay, so the next category is called weak words.
Weak words. Okay, what makes a word weak?
Well, these are words that tend to make your statements sound less confident
Okay.
or less direct, and they can undermine your message even if you don't realize it.
Interesting. Okay, so what's the first weak word on our list?
Okay, so the first one is maybe?
Maybe. Oh, yeah, I use that one a lot.
Yeah, me too. It's a way of hedging your bets.
Yeah.
But it can also make you sound unsure of yourself.
Right, like you're not really committed to what you're saying.
Exactly. So the source suggests being more direct when possible.
Okay, so give me an example.
So instead of saying, maybe we can go,
Right.
you could say, let's go.
Okay. Yeah, that's much more decisive.
It shows that you're confident and you're taking charge.
Yeah, I like that.
Good.
All right, what's next?
Okay, the next one is, I think.
I think, oh, this is another one that I use all the time.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Like, I think it's a good idea, or I think we should do this.
Yeah, and again, it's not wrong,
Right.
but it can be a bit redundant.
How so?
Well, if you're expressing an opinion,
Yeah,
it's already implied that you think it.
that's true.
So you don't always need to say it explicitly.
So I can just cut to the chase.
Exactly. So
Right.
instead of, I think it's okay,
I can just say it's okay.
much simpler.
Much stronger.
Yeah.
Okay, I think is out unless it's really necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, so the next weak word is kinda.
Kinda. Oh yeah, this is like the king of vagueness.
It is. It's like you're not fully committed to what you're saying.
Right, like I'm kind of tired or it's kind of cold.
Exactly. It's like you're leaving yourself an escape route,
Yeah.
but it can also make you sound less convincing.
So what's the solution?
Just be direct.
Okay, so instead of I'm kind of tired,
Just say, I'm tired.
easy enough.
Right.
All right, what else weakens our speech?
Okay, the next one is, you know.
Oh, this is another classic filler word.
Yeah, it's like a verbal tick.
And it's so easy to overuse it.
It is, but it doesn't really add anything to your message.
Right. It just kind of clutters things up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, the solution is simple.
Just get rid of it.
Exactly. Just cut it out.
Is out. Okay, what's the last weak word?
Okay, the last one is honestly.
Honestly, I actually use this one when I really want to emphasize that I'm telling the truth.
Right, and that's the intention,
Yeah.
but it can have the opposite effect.
Really? How so?
Well, if you have to say you're being honest,
Yeah.
it implies that maybe you're not always honest.
Oh, that's a good point. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, so the source suggests just stating your opinion directly.
Okay, so instead of honestly, I don't like it,
We say, I don't like it.
and let your tone of voice convey the honesty.
Exactly.
Okay, I like it.
Good.
All right, so that was weak words, which I think is so interesting because
Yeah,
it's not that those words are bad.
right.
It's just that they can subtly undermine our message.
Yeah, it can make you sound less confident.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one more category.
We do.
What is it?
Okay, so the last category is everyday fixes.
Okay, everyday fixes. What does that mean?
So these are common words that have simple alternatives
Okay.
that can just make your English sound a bit more polished.
Okay, I'm all for that. What's first?
Okay, so the first one is got.
God. Oh yeah, this is like the workhorse of the English language.
It has so many different meanings.
But that's also the problem.
Right. It can be vague.
So what's the fix?
Well, the source gives the example of using bought instead of got when you're talking about a purchase.
Okay, so instead of I got a new phone,
You could say, I bought a new phone.
okay, so just a little bit more specific.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good one.
Okay, so the next one is that.
That.
And I'm not talking about that as a demonstrative pronoun.
Right.
I'm talking about that as a conjunction.
Okay, give me an example.
So, for example, I think that she is nice.
Okay.
You can often just remove that.
Oh, so I think she is nice.
Exactly. The meanings is the same.
It is, yeah, and it actually sounds a little bit smoother.
It does. It makes your sentence flow better.
Okay, that is out where possible.
Exactly.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, so the next one is sorry.
Sorry. Okay.
And this is specifically about overusing sorry.
Right, like when you bump into someone on the street and you're like, oh, sorry, even though it wasn't really your fault.
Exactly. Or when you start a question with sorry.
Oh, yeah, like, sorry, can I ask something?
Yeah, and it can make you sound less confident.
It does.
So the source suggests only using sorry when you genuinely need to apologize.
Okay.
And for questions, you could just ask directly.
So just, can I ask something?
Exactly. Much more assertive.
I like it. Okay, what else?
Okay, so nice is back.
Nice again.
Yes, but this time it's about using nice to describe places.
Okay, so instead of, it's a nice place.
You could use more descriptive adjectives like quiet, clean, or beautiful.
Oh, I like that. So it's a quiet place if it's peaceful. It's a clean place if it's tidy.
Right.
Or it's a beautiful place if it's visually appealing.
Exactly. Much more evocative.
It is.
Good.
Okay, 2 more, I think.
Yes. So the next one is, I feel like...
Oh yeah, this is another one that I use a lot.
Me too. It's very common.
Like, I feel like it's gonna rain, or I feel like we should do this.
Yeah, and the problem is that feel is really about emotions and sensations.
Okay.
So when you're expressing an opinion or making a suggestion,
Yeah.
it's more accurate to use think.
Oh, okay, so instead of I feel like it's wrong.
You could say, I think it's wrong.
Okay. Or instead of I feel like we should go.
You could say, I think we should go.
Okay, that's a good distinction.
It is.
All right.
Last one.
Okay, the last one is, I'm no expert, but.
Oh, I hate when people say that.
Me too. It's like you're undermining your own credibility.
Right before you even say anything.
Exactly. So the source suggests just stating your idea or opinion directly.
Okay, so instead of, I'm no expert, but I think we should do this.
You could say, here's an idea.
Right.
Or my opinion is.
Okay, much more confident.
Yeah, and it shows that you value your own input.
Absolutely.
Good.
Okay, wow, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We talked about 2 simple words, repeated too much words, weak words, and everyday fixes. And all of these are about making small tweaks to your language.
Yeah, and it's amazing how just those little changes
Yeah.
can make such a big difference.
Absolutely. It's all about using language more consciously.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that you don't need to learn a ton of new vocabulary to improve your English.
It's more about using the vocabulary you already have.
More effectively.
Exactly. Yeah.
So my challenge to everyone listening is to pick just 1 or 2 of these words this week and really focus on using the alternatives.
Practice them in your conversations.
Yeah, and you know what? You can even practice by yourself.
Absolutely. Talk to yourself in the mirror.
Exactly, because the more you use them, the more natural they will become.
Exactly, and you'll be amazed at how much more confident and fluent you sound.
Absolutely. So remember, better words lead to better English.
They do.
And here's a final thought for you.
Okay.
As you start to pay more attention to the words you use, not only will you notice a difference in how other people perceive you,
but you'll also start to see yourself as a more capable and confident English speaker.
Absolutely. It's all about mindset.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Bye.